I was trying to avoid it, but they made me do it. We get into the Mike Vrabel, Dianna Russini story next on Beyond the Locker Room. It's a story, quite honestly, didn't care to do, but I was watching it closely to see how things will play out, especially when it comes to these type of stories. You don't want to kind of jump in on the first day or two. I wanted to see what would kind of marinate, what would kind of be produced after a few weeks to see where it is. And wow, boy, did I get my money's worth on that. So if you're just in a hole and you just kind of get out, or you're hibernating, you just got out from sleeping for about 3-4 months, a story broke, and it broke on March 28th, where photos were leaked, or sparked, I should say. Let's put it that way, a scandal. In Sedona, Arizona, at a nice resort, where Dianna Russini, the former reporter, and we'll get that in a second, former reporter of The Athletic, formerly of ESPN, was found, spending time with the head coach of the New England Patriots, Mike Vrabel, holding hands, just happened to be there, they said, as the response that was coming out from their quarters. Let's put it that way. That was on, and I think the way I'll go about this is I'm going to break this up into three elements of this. We'll go through the timeline of what happened, which I'm starting to do now. 2, I'll go to it as kind of the responsibility from the team standpoint, the Patriots, and the fallout from that, and the fallout of this situation. And then 3, I can get into what responsibility does the NFL have in this circumstance. So in this case, Mike Vrabel, this is for March 28th is when these photos appeared. And then afterwards, on April 7th, so there's a lot of, back and forth, and a lot of people didn't want to say anything, at The Athletic, and stood by best Dianna Russini initially. April 7th comes, page 6 published the Sedona photos, which showed Vrabel and Russini in intimate settings, including a rooftop and a hot tub. Both parties initially denied any improper relationship. That's April 7th. So March 28th, the photos occurred at the Ambient Luxury Resort in Sedona, Arizona, March 28th. About a week or so later, page 6 then publishes these photos, given to them by, we don't know who the source is, and we probably never will. April 14th, The Athletic conducted an internal investigation to the matter, during which Russini resigned. Now, initially on April 7th, they had said, "Hey, that's our girl. We support her and this and that, so on and so forth." When the investigation concluded a week later, she was packing her bags. April 18th comes. The NFL announced that Mike Vrabel would not face review for violating the league's personal conduct policy. Find that very interesting. Put a pin in that. April 21st, Vrabel addressed the local Patriots media, acknowledging that he had been forced to have difficult conversations with his family and team. I'm sure he did. April 23rd, the controversy deepened as old photos surfaced, including images from a New York City bar in 2020 and a Mississippi casino in 2024. Vrabel announced he would miss day 3 of the NFL draft to undergo counseling with his family. I'll leave that there. May 6, TMZ released photos and video of the pair renting a boat in Putnam County, Tennessee in June 2021. By the way, I believe those are the photos where a very pregnant Dianna Russini is showing up for that boat. I'm pretty sure that, check it out, but that's what it looked like to me. Mid-May now, so we're in mid-May. Vrabel returned to Patriots facility to coach the team's rookie minicamp while Russini deactivated her social media profiles. Ain't that something, huh? Well, so let me give my summation, at least off the top of, some of the things that are interesting to highlight. There's a few things happening at the same time here. There's the type of jobs each person has that you can mention as the rationale about why one person still has their job and the other person doesn't. Fair enough. Journalistic integrity, the whole 9. Absolutely get that. So that's one thing. However, I would say this, and I find this interesting, and we'll get that in a second. But the Vrabel situation of this is very fascinating. How he's kind of walked away essentially scot free, at least professionally. I'm not telling you what's going on behind closed doors with his house. He might be paying the piper a lot more on that one, but that's up to him and his family and whoever he prays to. I'll leave it there. However, from a professional standpoint, so far he's been considered unscathed. So let's get into it. So what responsibility do the Patriots have in this situation? I find this fascinating because it cuts across journalistic and professional lines. It cuts across gender lines, how people view this. In some ways, it cuts across racial lines. You're wondering, what are you talking about, Beyond? I'll get to that in a second. It's fascinating to see here how, the New England Patriots have had no interest in seeing what's going on for an individual. And now, it is the New England Patriots. Let's put it that way. So context does matter. This is not a franchise in this case that walks really with a moral high ground in mind. And not saying many NFL teams do. They all want to win. They all kind of cut corners, shades of gray. So I'm not saying anyone's saints in this case, mind the pun, as an NFL fan. However, New England is a special brand in this case as a franchise, considering some of their deep, dark secrets of the past, be it Deflategate or Spygate. I'll just leave the ownership of Robert Kraft and what he does in his spare time for you guys to check that out on Google. All I have to say is New England, plays with they go into very gray areas at times. It goes into the dark arts. I'll put it that way. So to expect this bunch to be the ones to say, hey, you know what, we have a certain type of a standard that we're holding, I do find this interesting because I do wonder if this was a player that did this, would the same standard be in play? Just something to consider. There's another angle, player versus coach or management. That's interesting. Now, the reason why in this case I mentioned earlier, some of you all kind of worked up about it, I don't know, nor do I care. I think it's something that has to be mentioned. Within the same market, which makes it really actually a pretty similar parallel, because within the same New England market, not only about 2 years ago, a coach for another Boston New England team was in let's say entanglement perhaps, with a celebrity woman involved as well too. This time she was she was the cheatee, not the cheater in this case. The way the Celtics presented it, wherever you want to say, if you want to play the role of, hey, it's like two grown adults, consenting adults, fine, move on with it. Fair enough. Has no impact on the team, whatever the case may be. Now, I understand the woman involved, who name for the most part, I think, was protected. I think, I believe they try to keep her name out of it as best she could. And it was interesting. I think they ended up getting her. I think they ended up getting her name at some point. But. I think if I recall, she was actually part of the organization, but also I think she is also dating someone that was in ownership, which makes it complicated. No two ways about that, which makes me think that, getting rid of Ime Udoka was more to do with, getting paid back. And I understand that, and you can say it's also dealing with what's going on within an organization or within a company. Fair enough. I got no issue with that. The way that the Celtics presented it, though, made you think there's something more unseemly, which therefore made him almost persona non grata for 2 years and almost cost him his career. Because you were sworn the way how the Celtics were talking about it and how they're protecting the name of the person involved as if that person was a victim of something, which made us wonder, wonder what's going on. Now I'm gonna tread lightly because I ain't trying to get banned on YouTube, but it made you wonder, like, what's going on here? Like, is there some legal ramifications why we can't understand, what's happening and who this person is that you cheated with? It was left a very salty taste in your mouth. Then to come to find out, oh no, he was just really horny in this case here and just wanted to, do his thing here with this lady, and she wanted to do the same thing. I ain't putting her, she's just as much involved as it takes two to tango. So I find it interesting how that was positioned, how he lost his job pretty much within a couple of days. I think he was suspended, and then he was gone before the end of the week. And here we are now. And in some ways, you can make an argument much more problematic relationship in some ways. Because within the in-house, it is problematic. No two ways on the Celtics side. But this one's dealing with a reporter. And I'll tell you in a second why it's problematic, because it gets into some interesting things, and we'll get to that in a moment with the NFL's responsibility with this situation, with their pseudo investigation. So the NFL, in true NFL fashion, have kind of closed the doors, batten the hatchets. It's really fascinating to watch. Going back to my previous discussion with Ime Udoka, another difference is to watch how one sport handles these type of scales versus another sport. So the NBA, when that Udoka item hit, it was like reality TV. It had celebrity stuff. It had celebrity, involved in it. Nia Long in this case, so it made it for hot topics on all the talk shows. Everyone's talking about it. You're Colin Cowherd, Stephen A. Smith, you name it. First things first, you name it. Whoever is there, Mad Dog, you name it. All of them couldn't get enough of this, salivating at the thing, at the trough. What I found interesting, though, is in the NFL, when something like this is breaking loose, everyone clams up and got nothing to say. Everyone now is all saying, well, we have to be sensitive to the situation, and we have to do this, and we have to do that. And it was very apparent if you watch, Pro Football Talk, well, Mike Florio and Chris Sims, where Chris Sims started talking about it, Mike Florio's like, whoa, hey, whoa, just be careful. It's like, well, what would be just be careful? And Chris Sims like, what? What are we being careful about? To say alleged in this case, as you say, if you want to say that, having a relationship, what, now that's something we can't talk about now? All of a sudden the NFL people, all the NFL media just clammed up. I don't think it got much coverage that day or so on ESPN. The Ime Udoka thing was going on for like weeks. It was fallout from that. All sorts of stuff. And this thing here is like, what's fueling this right now and pushing this forward is not the sports media, because obviously they're a bunch of jellyfish. They got no backbone, especially when it comes to the NFL, which is now proven. Well, again, NFL is king, so everyone want to make sure they still can come at the trough, so nobody wants to touch it. But the NFL in this case finds themselves in these situations time and time again. And the reason why they end up being on the back foot is, instead of just be proactive and actually do the proper, proper research and investigations that they should, they kind of sweep it under the rug. I give you in this case here John Gruden. I give you Ray Rice, which they thought in this case here they could just go and say, oh, we just go away and stuff like that. And then the public got more and more like, wait, what's going on? Hey, hold on a second, what? He did what? And then the camera, then the video comes up with Ray Rice in the elevator or the lobby hitting the lady. Just say hitting somebody. Let's put it that way. I would say, the Ray Rice situation, and then you have the same situation going on. We have John Gruden with some of his verbal things in email, and it kept drip. More emails kept coming. It's like, oh, it's getting worse. And finally, the Raiders decided to do something about it. Finally, the NFL decided to do something about it, because once again, they get caught in the back foot. This looks like it's leading into another situation like this. Every few weeks, another story comes out about them. Another video comes out. Another set of revelations come out. And where I wonder where the NFL is just so quiet about this is, you have to ask yourself that if you have a reporter, a very big time, powerful reporter, like Dianna Russini, some backbencher. Dianna Russini, like, as for one of the top football reporters for ESPN, then she's working for The Athletic. So she ain't like someone just kind of like, oh, it's like no one's going to take what she says seriously when she puts a report out. She, for years, has put out reports on potential trades involving Mike Vrabel's teams, be it the New England Patriots currently or his former team, the Tennessee Titans, that he coached. And you have to sit here and wonder, like, okay, so wait 1 second, what's going on here? So one of the stories I think that comes out of the play that where it's why I wonder why the NFL has not done much more of an investigation. It happened in May 2021, where Russini reported that time when she was at ESPN that the Atlanta Falcons had, quote, discovered several offers for Julio Jones, the star receiver at the time, including an offer for a first-round draft pick. And that the Titans, remember, Titans at this time, who's coaching them? Mike Vrabel, were considered long shots. A few weeks later now, the Titans acquired Jones for a significantly lower package, a 2022 second-round pick and a 2023 fourth-round pick. You have to start asking yourself, what's going on and how is this going on? We saw a similar situation. Now, to be fair, she was the only one who mentioned A.J. Brown stuff tied to New England. However, You know, she was the first one that was going out there talking about A.J. Brown going from Philadelphia to New England. And you have to start asking yourself, like, hey, like, are we manipulating the market? During some pillow talk, perhaps. What's going on here? And I don't know how the NFL sitting here let that slide when, it's essentially almost like a form of inside trading. And finding ways to manipulate the market to get it to where you want it. I mean, that's really what we're wondering about, what is being speculated. And the NFL's got nothing to say about this? I mean, can you imagine this happening in the NBA? Imagine this happening in the NBA. Say a reporter, male or female, and whatever the case may be, and they're having a relationship with somebody on a team. And all the same stuff I just mentioned happen. Pick whatever player you want that was supposedly supposed to be traded to X team, and all of a sudden he arrives a few weeks later on the next team with from a better offer. Knowing how some of you guys are out there, I mean, you all freaking out about plants getting done by Kawhi Leonard, okay, for a contract to get some extra cash underneath the table, and that there is almost going to go to Congress. It seems like, and here we are here, full blown playoff teams here. You'll be at the Titans or the Patriots now, just being able to say whatever they want because they got their own mouthpiece putting it out there to kind of get the swirl the waters to make things just right for them to get the right trade offers. Like, no one thinks this is wrong. I don't know. Give it some thought, folks. It's interesting to see how the two leagues are actually not only how they handle their own matters when it comes to scandal to some extent, but B, how the media actually views them and how they actually move ahead with the stories or not move ahead with the stories, depending on which one is in hot water at the moment. So I find that very interesting. As I said before, I don't think this is done. I think there's a drip, drip, drip. Very much how you see political scandals. It starts out with 1, 2, and then boom, the faucet happens. I don't know. I don't think this is over with. I know in this case, knowing in true NFL fashion, they're trying to sweep it under the rug. I don't expect the Patriots to do anything because it's the Patriots. But it does feel, from a just standpoint and justice standpoint, I'm just honest, like Dianna Russini's got no job at the moment, and who knows, her best bet now is doing reality TV, and this dude's still out here with a job. Make it make sense. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Tell me what your comments are down below, because boy, this one's a hot one. And I said before, he ain't done yet, because right now he's been hiding from the media. And at some point during the preseason or during the summer when they have the 2-a-days, it's going to get interesting when folks are asking him some more questions, because he really hasn't been able to ask any questions to him, because he did a statement the first day when he came on board. They asking questions. The PR group, the Patriots, jumped in quickly, but at some point you can't save him. It's not going anywhere. And mark my words, guarantee you, sadly, because we're in a patriarchal sexist society, and the woman usually ends up getting the brunt of this, guarantee you every road team from the Jets to the Dolphins to anyone else in between is going to play one song in the stadium the DJ's got lined up ready to go for New England. It's one of my favorite songs from Michael Jackson, actually. Trust me, Dirty Diana will be played in almost every stadium the Patriots go to. Sad, but true. I'll leave it there, folks. You know where to find me. You can find me, as always, on Instagram, on X, on Facebook, and on Blue Sky. And as always, you can find me right here on YouTube, where you can like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for the support, guys. Talk to you next time. Take care. Be safe. Keep it locked. Peace.